Okay, so we're going to go to, for the question for tonight, I actually want to make it more of a discussion. And I want to build off something that Todd had brought up a couple weeks ago. So just once again, a reminder, if you have questions about the Bible or God or the faith or anything, you put it in the white box on the back table, and we look at those questions on Wednesday night. But so let me set up this question. Exodus, most people know the story, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, Exodus lists these 10 plagues that God brings on Egypt. At the time, Israel was in slavery in Egypt, and so the 10 plagues are broken up into 3 sets of 3 plus 1. So what that looks like is there'll be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then the grand finale. The grand finale is the killing of the kids, which becomes the Passover. It kind of becomes a big thing for Israel culture, and then in the Christian church, it was substituted with the Lord's Supper. So, but as far as the plagues on Egypt, though, the 3 sets of 3 are broken up. The first 2 are warned. The third one comes without any warning. The 4th and the 5th are warned by Moses, and then the 6th one has no warning. 7, 8 has a warning. 9 doesn't. And so it has this 3 sets of 3. Follows the same kind of pattern throughout. And the thing that we need to look at, though, is the first 3 and possibly one other plague the Israelites had to go through. They had to experience it along with the Egyptians. So at least 3, possibly 4 of the plagues, and there's only 10, Israel had to also, at least in part, experience. So the question being, if God was saving Israel, why did Israel have to go through some of the plagues? What do you guys think? So basically just caught in the crossfire? Okay. All right. So that they would know what... Sure. So that they would know what Egypt was going through? Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Anything else? Or anybody else? Either or. Gracie? Okay, so help me follow here. Okay, so you're saying it could be because God is trying to help their doubt. So how is them experiencing going to help them with their doubt? Okay. Anything else or anyone else? Why did Israel have to go through some of the same plagues? Danny? So then, why did Israel have to experience some of the plagues too? It's okay if you don't have an idea. That's okay. That's okay. Anybody? Anything? Grace? So it was bound to happen. Okay, don't misunderstand. Can you kind of build on that idea a little bit more? Kind of like how we have to get sick or we have to experience hell with the rest of Roswell, or I mean hail, not hell. Okay. No, it's a good idea. Great. Shane? Okay. So maybe because they were doing some of the kind of the some of the same stupid stuff. Maybe. I mean, we definitely do know that's true, at least in part, because they were still had idols. They did still were still doing different things with sacrifices they shouldn't have been. So yes, that is something that is brought up. So definitely, grace, disgrace. Okay, so maybe because they were mingling together. Good ideas. Anybody else before I move on? Okay. I have 4 of my own ideas, and I think you guys have hit on a lot of them. First off, to teach compassion. I mean, that God still does that with us today, too. He uses the things that other people that we don't like going through. He has us go through similar things to the people that we don't like, and it teaches us compassion along the way. I mean, yeah, somebody said something along the lines of that. Number 2, to prevent our joy at their loss. I think we kind of have a way of slipping into our kind of carnal nature there, and we kind of enjoy it when people that we really don't like get what's coming to them. You know, I mean, I'm always reminded of the story of Jesus' disciples where they're kind of, having a bit of a hard time. And so the disciples say, should we call down fire from heaven and just wipe these fools out? And Jesus is like, yeah, calm down, guys, calm down. I'm paraphrasing. But, so yeah, I think it prevented their joy at the loss in part. But also, third off, I think that this is kind of God's SOP, his standard operational protocol. I mean, think about this, okay? We have to go through some tribulation before the rapture, don't we? Right? We're seeing things get kind of tense in the world. They're probably going to get more tense. A lot of times it's taught that the rapture is going to save us from everything unpleasant. That's just not true. I mean, look at Christian history so far for the past 2,000 years. It didn't save any of the people in Africa. It didn't save any of the people, in Rome. It didn't save any of the people in Jerusalem. I mean, just so many different people have suffered in the past 2,000 years. And so, yes, absolutely, we do have to go through at least some tribulation before the rapture. And, I mean, also we see this with, getting to heaven. Before we get to heaven, we have to suffer, right? We go through our physical issues in life before we get to heaven. And we're all excited for heaven, but we're not there yet. Or another example, this would be when you get saved. I mean, getting saved involves at least a measure of pain because you have to leave your sin. Sin is fun. It's something pleasing. You know why people sin? Because they like it. They like how it feels good. So they keep sinning. The world sins because they're the world. Christians sin because it feels good and we like it. See what I mean? And then we feel guilty about it. I'm not saying it gives us a lasting relief. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there is that element of our human nature that craves sin. It is we crave it. And we oftentimes get in this kind of rut of saying, I would never do that. And then, wouldn't you know, there we go doing, right when we never, there we go doing it. And so, yeah, there's always this element of pain and suffering before God does something, which brings me to my fourth thing here. Everything, and I've mentioned this a couple different times on Sundays, everything costs something. So, God save us, but don't inconvenience us. Like, well, in that saving, there is also an element of something that you're not going to always enjoy. When God brings judgment, a lot of times, we oftentimes have to experience at least some of it. We always think, oh yes, God, bring judgment on the sinners, right? But think about the book of Habakkuk. Here's this prophet, and he's just saying, God, why are you letting evil people get away with what they're doing? And so God says, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to bring judgment. I'm going to use the wicked Babylonians. And so Habakkuk says, hold on. They're even worse than we are. How could you do this? And so then he goes off, and you can read the rest of the book yourself. But there's a lot of times that we want to think, God, bring judgment on these people because I really don't like them, and they're annoying me, and they offend me. And in the meantime, a lot of that judgment and punishment means that we have to experience some of it. There was actually, there was a time when I was a worship pastor, and I had this member on my team who got into adultery, and it was very awkward because there was just this whole, I don't want to get too much into it, but there was a whole family connection going on there, and it made it super awkward to deal with. So as the situation progressed, inevitably other people got dragged in and hurt. So at first off, she started doing it, and she had a conflicted conscience. Have you ever done something you know was wrong and you have that conflicted conscience? You start biting everybody's heads off? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about then. So she had this conflicted conscience, and she started acting out against us. So that made it awkward. And so then eventually we had to correct the situation as we became aware of the situation. And I even told her, I said, look, I don't need to know the details. You don't even have to, this is what is going on. If I'm wrong, let's have a conversation. Otherwise, you can tell people whatever you want, but you need to step off the worship team now, effective now. And I never made her admit to it because I already knew it. There's no reason in dragging her through the mud. It was a complicated situation. And so she stepped down, and she proceeded to then spread all kinds of untrue stories about what I had done, and it turned into this whole big thing. And man, was that awkward. It just every day added a new complexity of awkwardness to it. You know when you're in those situations and you're just like, man, I just really don't want to be in this situation anymore. And then you wake up and you're still in it, and you think, maybe it was a bad dream, but it wasn't a bad dream. It was a little bit of that. So we started bringing correction on the situation, and that only brought gossip from her when we were the ones who didn't do anything wrong, but we still had to suffer see what I mean? God bringing judgment through her conscience and stuff, and who had to be punished for it? Well, us, right? It's the same thing with your kids, right? Your kids get into doing stupid stuff, you have to deal with it, it now becomes your problem, right? It's the same thing with God when God deals with something. So eventually, God started, doing things in her, and it wasn't pleasant to watch because we saw the pain that she was going through, and she was hurt, and she refused to repent. That wasn't fun to watch. Here was someone who we had fed into and loved and was part of our team for years, and then we had to see her go through that, and she refused to stop this immoral relationship. It was very difficult to watch. So then we had to, it was a pain for us, not pain like, ugh, but a pain as in like, ugh, what a sorrow to have to deal with it. Then we ended up feeling like a failure at the end, because there's one of those situations where no matter what you did, what is it? Cursed if you do, cursed if you don't. It was a lot like that. We tried the best we could, but at the end, everything we were trying to make it better and fix it did not work. Nothing was working. And I'm reminded of that part in the Bible where it says that the rain falls on the righteous and the wicked. Life has a way of happening. And when God brings judgment, we aren't exempt from that. I know there's a lot of these prophets who are talking about judgment on America and all these different things. Well, we live in America, so guess who would also be suffering from that judgment? Us. So let's not get too excited about that. So why should Israel be exempt from a hurting world when they are a part of it? I think that's a pretty good answer to this question. Why should Israel be exempt from all these things? But then you see, here's the thing. Then in a turn of events, Israel actually does become exempt from it by God saving their livestock and saving them from the other plagues. So that's the amazing part. The amazing part isn't why did they have to go through the first 3. The amazing part is why didn't they have to go through the other 7? But God can use the pain that we go through as a way of our gain. But the thing is that I've noticed, and you see this throughout Scripture, is for people who refuse to let God teach them, the punishment that He brings them to isn't something that brings growth of character. It just becomes something that causes more pain. It becomes a pointless pain that they go through. But for Christians, He takes us through pain, and we grow from it, and He guides us through it, and it's something that enriches us. There's actually a verse that says this. It says, God disciplines those who He loves. You could easily predate this question by asking, well, why did God even allow Israel to go into slavery in the first place? And then that takes us into a whole conversation of why does God let anything bad happen to people? And so then that takes you down the rabbit hole of, if God's such a good God, why does He allow the pain, and so on and so forth. But that, once again, is a bigger question than we can answer tonight. But I do want to kind of turn this back on you guys and say, okay, here's a question for you guys. Share a time, if you feel comfortable, share a time, okay, that you had to go through a really rough time, something really bad happened, a struggle or whatever, and it turned out good in the long run. I'll kind of mention something, and maybe you guys will feel a little bit easier sharing this. For me, going through colitis, because I was young and arrogant, I had all the answers to all the world's problems, and then now I'm weak and frail, and I have had to learn dependence on God on a newer level that I never would have chosen for myself. I liked being dependent on God to the extent that, yeah, I should read the Bible if I get around to it. I didn't like the idea of being completely dependent on God because I'm a hot mess. I didn't like that bit. And I think we can all kind of relate on that. We want to be close enough to God that we're happy, but not so much we have to get become one of those weird Christians. And so for me, colitis was a huge struggle, but it also was a huge blessing to me. So you guys, everybody here, is there a time that you want to share when you went through a really big struggle, but it turned out for the good? Okay, so basically choosing wise friends. Okay.